Uganda, and he is our development capability manager for East Africa. And these are the countries that we work in. We started 10 years ago in the 6 countries painted red. When we managed to get extra funding from the British government, we added in, I don't know whether they're brown or, yeah, the brown colour countries, Malawi and Mozambique, Cote d'Ivoire and Liberia. And last year, 2012, we are helping the governments, and I must say, we don't deliver the drugs. The governments do it, it's their program. We help them treat 50 million people against schistosomiasis, and more than that were dewormed. In 2013, we're hoping to move into Zimbabwe. In fact, we've just made our first transfer to Zimbabwe. In Senegal, likewise. We're starting to map Ethiopia. Not a single person has been treated in Ethiopia, virtually ever. And there are 81 million people live in Ethiopia. So we're looking to try and reach out to at least 15 or 20 million people there. And the DRC can only be described as an elephant in Africa which has hardly been tamed. And there must be millions and millions of cases. If we're going to eliminate these diseases, we've got to attack DRC and Ethiopia. But it's not easy, and I'm not quite sure how successful we'll be, how quickly. As far as giving what we can is concerned, as I said, SCI was recommended as one of the top. We are actually number 2 on GiveWell, mainly because the GiveWell people in their analysis feel that malaria is a better investment than deworming. And it's quite interesting that a number of the speakers today and the questions are all about priorities. Do you stop malaria, or do you stop neglected tropical diseases? Do you save a child who might then die of malaria, or do you save a child with malaria who might then get neglected tropical diseases? And obviously, the priorities, if they've got to be there, it would be nice if we didn't have to make that priority. If we could give a child a bed net and a deworming tablet. But at the moment, we are still a little bit short of funds. I have to say, and Holly here, who is also a star, she is the lady who raised more money anywhere else in Britain for, what was it, living below the line on £1 a day. That's because she mobilised the Giving What We Can people to support her. And also as a result of one of the talks that was heard in the website that was seen, one individual knocked on my office and gave me £1 million. And as a result of that, we're treating every school child in Burundi for the next 4 years. I just wish there were a few more like that. But it's absolutely fantastic. It's been so good, and I'm just so proud of everybody, whether they're giving £3 a month, £5 a month, or £10 a month. The big, high net worth donors are few and far between. And usually those that are out there like to give to rather more sexy charities, if you like. We do get money from the British government. We get good amounts of money, and we work in some countries which you've seen on that map. But the smaller donations, what I try to do is use them where nobody else is doing any work. So we use them in the Uganda Islands, for instance, and in Senegal, Zimbabwe and Ethiopia, which the big donors still do not sadly support. I'd just like to introduce you and ask you to recognise Dr. Narcis Kabatireni, who until recently ran the bilharzia, schistosomiasis control in the Uganda Ministry of Health, and Dr. Edridi here has just taken his job. He is now instead joined SCI, and he's responsible for capacity building. So why don't we give them a round of applause. They're only in England for 3 days. And I can tell you, it is an immense pleasure to work with both of them. So I'm just going to ask Narcis just to come up and tell you that what would we do with the next £40,000 that we get donated. And he will explain what these red dots are in the middle of Lake Victoria.
Yeah, thank you. And good afternoon. As Professor Alan Fenwick said, I've just returned from Ministry of Health in Uganda, where I had started the cancer program, and which I started in 2003. And when I joined the Ministry of Health in 2000, earlier 1980, when I was reading in the files in my office, I found there was a lot of bilharzia in the country, killing many people, but there was nobody working on it. And for almost 20 years, I tried to do something. I remember I even went to Denmark to study, and when I was there, I learned that there was plus one thing, the drug which could cure bilharzia, but unfortunately we could not have it in our country, and people continued to suffer with the disease, even though there was treatment elsewhere. And until, luckily enough, when I was in Zambia, I met Professor Alan Fenwick, and when I was talking to him on a table, telling him with my problem, then he got interested and started helping us, and we started controlling bilharzia in 2003, when we mapped the country and found that we had about 4 million people suffering from the disease countrywide. And we started treating them, but the disease we managed to reduce the prevalence of infection in many areas. We reduced the mobility, the disease could stay, transmission was continuing, but mobility was no longer there. But around Lake Victoria and the islands, around Lake Victoria Basin, the disease remained almost the same. And I was wondering what is happening. Only to find that there were so many islands within the lake occupied, and people were not able to get there because water transport was very expensive. And we approached Alan again, then we did mapping, and we found that everyone was highly infected, up to 80% of the children, up to almost 100% of the people, if we had a more sensitive method of diagnosis, were infected, thus they needed treatment, but they were not getting the drug, although we had enough drugs, but we could not manage to get the drug deeper in the islands because it was very expensive to travel there. And luckily enough, again, Professor Alan Fenwick, two years in 2010, through his organization, extended some help, and we have been since then. We did some census, and we found that there were about 200,000 people in these areas, and we are treating them yearly, and we hope at least we have also reduced the mobility in these areas. And of course, transmission is continuing because sanitation is extremely poor, but the mobility of the disease is not that high anymore. But we are hoping that with time, if we double the treatment, we would be able to maybe reduce the disease and interrupt transmission. The only problem is, are we able to sustain the amount of money that is required to reach island? We don't go there ourselves, we just give the money to the districts, and the district people also train the drug distributors in the villages, and the drug distributors have got to go from village to village distributing the drugs, but that one costs money because water transport is expensive, and SCI has been assisting us in that. And then finally, I want to say that I retired because I became old, and Alan
is even older.
SCI helped me to do capacity building in other affected countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, and that's the job I'm doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Narcissus. I just thought it would be nice to bring him with me and show him off to a group like yourselves. I'm going to finally just finish. I hope that I've shown you that we are doing a lot of good. We've got about 50% of the coverage that we need in Sub-Saharan Africa, but there are still something like 200 million children that we've got to reach every year, basically, for the next 5 years. And the donations that we do get, I can assure you, are put to really good use. And the same as was on the Against Malaria Foundation board. None of the donations that are given from the Giving What We Can people go to paying any of our salaries. All that is funded by the British government and by the American government and by the university. And so it really is, this is why Give Well and Giving What We Can, I think, found us so cost effective, because all the money is channeled through to deliver and distribute the drugs which are already donated. Now, for any of you who are in any way medically inclined or interested, we do have a Global Health short course which only runs for a week. It's held every June, and the next one is in late June 2013. And much to the horror of Imperial College, I only charge £60 for students to come for the whole week. Of course, they've got to find their own room and lodging and what have you. But nevertheless, if you know of anybody who's interested, it's a good introduction. And our website is easy enough. If you can remember schistosomiasis, then all you've got to remember is the first half of it, schisto.org. And I think Giving What We Can is a wonderful organisation, and I know that from the feedback we get, we send out a 6-monthly newsletter to say what we've done with the money, and as I say, from the feedback we get, people feel that their money has been used as wisely as I am able to do so. So thank you very much, and good luck, Simon, with your chapter.
Thanks. Okay, so we've got some time for some questions now. Yeah, I'll
Actually, this question would be for the minister and the professor. I'm wondering about this emphasis these days on effectiveness. And it occurs to me that when you're looking at something like the islands, where it is very expensive to get the pills there to do it, if there is sometimes skewed incentives or real pressure on agencies not to take on very, very difficult projects. And you're speaking of Ethiopia, where many dare not go. So what sorts of pressures are out there for you?
I'll let Narcissus talk about the islands, and there is no doubt that they are the last group, the population in the country that haven't been tackled. We've done what you might call the low-hanging fruit. We've treated in those countries which have good governance. You'll notice we haven't treated in Angola yet, we haven't treated in DRC, Nigeria, no one dares set foot in. It's got to be done. If we're going to eliminate these diseases, we've got to tackle them. We at the moment are expanding to national coverage in 12 countries. I perhaps glossed over the map a little bit quickly, I was very aware of time, but we're only covering half of Africa, and we've covered the easy half. So it's a very good observation you've made. And Narcissus, it's true about the people in the islands, is it not? It's true that the people in the islands are the last people to be treated.
Exactly. They are the last to be treated, and the disease is being ignited. I remember a person who was here earlier was thinking that if we continue doing this, putting money in something which it stays the same, it does not stay the same. Some of the diseases are being eliminated. And indeed in Uganda, many areas we have almost eliminated this disease, and where the problem is left mainly around the large water bodies. Yeah. So there is the end of this route, and I hope there will be improvement because this disease will be eliminated. So
basically, of the 4 million, we've probably treated 3.5 million 3 times, and we don't need to treat them again. But the other 500,000, we've got to go back year in because they live in such poor conditions on the banks of the lakes where the snails which transmit the disease are living in large numbers.
I guess, and then thanks for that. And the really hard question, it seems, then is what happens when you do go after the harder cases and you start sort of falling down the league table of effectiveness? Yeah. Now that we're all so worried about effectiveness.
That is something else that we're having to make a business case. The British government, as Pete Springer said, are committed to a 0.07% GNP, something like that, whatever it is, GDP. And where do they spend their money? At the moment, they are stopping giving aid to India, where there are millions and millions of very poor people, but the Indians have got a space program. And so we do tick the boxes, there is no doubt. And what we're trying to do with the smaller donations that we get is start programs in Ethiopia, do the mapping, so that the Ethiopian government say, hey, we want more. And if they then ask the British government for funding, then the government are likely to respond on the grounds that there's government commitment. And that's part of our job also, is to generate government commitment.
I'll make a small comment on that. So, I mean, the issue that's being raised here is a hugely important one, and it touches fundamental questions of fairness, as you know, obviously. I spent a year at the National Institute for Health, and they were discussing you know, how they spend their money. And I've also visited the World Health Organization. They are discussing how they spend their money. And there's no doubt that the tendency is to go for the low-hanging fruit. Where can we get the most bang for the buck? That's easiest to sell and easiest to justify, and it makes a lot of sense. You have limited resources. You can say 1 million people here, blah, blah, blah. But what that does pretty much guarantee is that there will be people out in the most rural areas, the people on the islands and so on, who will be left behind. I mean, when I was sitting at the National Institutes of Health, and people are discussing these kinds of issues, they want to put their clinics in the middle of the biggest cities because they're going to reach a lot of people who need it. And they know that there are people out there in the outskirts. They're just not going to be touched by this because the infrastructure is so poor. There's no roads. It's hard. Some of these medications have to be transported. You know, refrigeration units. You need a special truck with refrigeration to keep certain medicines at the right thing to get out. And that person out there is no less deserving than the person in the city. But in the city, you can reach, you know, 100 for the one person you can reach out there. And so these types of trade-offs are being made, and they touch on one side. They touch these deep questions about should the numbers count in moral philosophy, about how do you choose between the 5 and the 1, 100 and the 10. Do you flip a coin, give them each an equal chance, or not?
I wonder also if it prevents us from looking at sort of long-term structural issues, which by their nature, you're not going to be able to claim effectiveness when you're there whispering in the ear of world leaders, trying to get them to do something about the subsidies in the World Trade Organization, because, you know, either that'll happen, you know, all at once, or it won't happen at all. You can claim effectiveness when you're doing these localized projects that, where you can show qualities.
I mean, the balance right now, I think we give this lady the opportunity to ask questions, but
yes.
the one answer I would say is that the US government have a President's Malaria Initiative, which has $50 billion allocated to it. They have PEPFAR, which is anti-AIDS, but doesn't allow condoms, and they have $50 billion in it. And they have a neglected tropical disease program, and there's $100 million in it. Yes, you were going to ask a question.
My point was really that philosophically the argument that you seem to be on your way to making was the opposite of the argument that you made earlier, which is that faced with the track with 4 people on it and the track with 1 person on it, then obviously we choose to say the 4 people rather than the 1. So I'm kind of interested that when it's posed as a philosophical abstract issue, it appears to be very easy to make the decision that numbers are all there is to it, really. You prioritise 4 over 1, but when it's a question of real life situations in which your $100 could treat 4 people in the city but only 1 person out on an island in Uganda, then it seems to be harder to make that judgment, and I'm not. That feels inconsistent.
Yeah. So we try and do both. I have to say, we try and balance.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, I've finished. Go.
So, quick comment. You notice that in my talk, I actually said we do spend these enormous amounts for the child trapped at the bottom of the well. And I said that was inefficient. It is inefficient. In some sense, it makes no sense. But in another sense, it represents something that we really care a lot about, and perhaps rightly so. You'll also recall that at the beginning of my talk, I said these are very complex issues. You have 40 minutes to talk. You give a little overview. I mean, an overview. You say a few things. But I said, my own view, these are extremely complex. I think the essence of morality, you have to take a pluralistic approach. So counting numbers, yeah, that's really important. You can't ignore numbers. But only counting in numbers, I think that's also a mistake. So there are, when you say it's inconsistent, it's not. I don't want to say it's not. I want to say it's not so much an issue of inconsistency as giving weight to competing values, all of which have significant weight. So if someone said, for example, I care about equality, and I care about freedom, and some people say, no, you have to pick. It's either freedom or equality. You can serve only one God. I think that's a mistake. Freedom matters. Equality matters too. You have to make trade-offs. I think the same is true in this area as well. There's trade-offs between competing moral values.
Yeah, another important thing about the islands. You see, once you treat, why we got attracted there, I said that we were treating around the the lock showers and so on to try to eliminate the disease. And the preference never changed. It did not change because occasionally some of the people from deeper in the islands come to the surface, to the lake shore to sell their fish, and they contaminate this area. So you can never reduce the disease or eliminate the disease if these people remain infected. You have to make sure that these people also, the disease goes, because occasionally they come and contaminate the lake surface area, and every other person whom we have treated gets reinfected. So in order to eliminate this disease, you must treat everybody. So it is not that you are limiting to 200,000 people here using more money, but in the end you protect so many others along the land on the mainland. So it is vital.
One last question, or I'll hand over to Zach. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for your talk. Just quickly on some of the statistics, I just want to see if I understood them right. That 80% of children in Africa have blood in their urine.
In certain villages, yes. It's a very focal disease, so there are vast areas where there's none. But where it really is bad and there's never been any treatment, you would find in around Lake Malawi at the moment, and in northern Mozambique, that statistic holds true.
But now 100% of Africa's school children
are about to be. The drug is being made available as of this year.
With the 250 million tablets, how long is the contract for? How long will
They have said they will give it for as long as is needed until the prevalence and intensity is down so that it's no longer a public health problem. Which basically means that we'll get it down below 10%, 5%, and then we will start doing diagnosis and treatment. Diagnosis is expensive. And of course, with the shortage of time, I wasn't able to give you an idea of what we do. But basically, we go into a group of schools, we take 10 or 15 kids, we test them, and if more than 2 or 3 are infected, we just treat the whole area. Because diagnosis is expensive. Once we've proven that it's there, we know that nearly everybody's going to be infected.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the issue then is sort of distribution, isn't it? When you're going to get these 250 million.
It's getting them through the port, it's getting them into the central medical stores, it's planning that they go to the right parts of the country where they're needed, it's training the teachers and the community volunteers to deliver the drugs, to prepare them for possible side effects like itching or headache or stomach pains, and then finally, because people are donors, they want to know some proof that what we've done or what we say we're going to do has actually been done. And so we do monitoring and evaluation, we make little documentaries and things like that too.
So do you think, how can we invest better in health service infrastructure in these countries, with the governments and things like that? And how much leakage, black market stuff, do you have to count into your estimation?
That's a 20-minute answer, but I'll try to be brief. On the corruption side, we're all aware that we are now dealing in the most corrupt, but also the most poor countries of the world. We have to choose very carefully, as we do, the people who we work with. There is fortunately no market for the drug. And praziquantel only treats schistosomiasis. And nobody who's got schistosomiasis can afford to buy it. So we're lucky there. We don't get the drug stolen and shipped to New York, like generic HIV drugs are. So that's a really good thing. The other thing is that we run our programs in such a way that, I won't say we drip feed the money in, but we send money to the government against a given budget, and then it's topped up after they've done the job and we've had that proven. So that's our job in a way. We're the intermediate between the donor, and we give the donor accountability. As far as the countries are concerned, we've had to go and meet the ministers of health. We've actually had to tell them what these diseases are in many cases, because they're very much diseases of the poorest of the poor. But like most politicians, if they're offered something which will look good in their constituencies, they're very happy to do it. And we do get incredible in-kind contributions from the governments in terms of the ministries of health, their offices, their laboratories, their technicians. They're all made available to us. So it's a good partnership. Did that answer all the questions?
Yeah, I just wonder how much we should be building that up.
Oh, I
This is-
know what I
this
was
is a
saying.
new
The health
business, the
systems.
donors and
The problem with health systems in Africa is the diversity of the people who live and where they live. We're trying to get to the last mile. Now, the statistic you could be shown is that in Tanzania there is one health centre for every 6,000 people. But realistically, there's one health centre for 500 people, and there's 5,500 people who live so far away that they can't get to the nearest health centre. And even if they did, the guy wouldn't be particularly well qualified, and he wouldn't have many drugs in his thing, and it's in a way hardly worth it. It's health system strengthening we do by giving a simple drug to the health people, and that actually, you know, boosts their standing in the villages. But as I say, the last mile is difficult. There is no doubt about it. That's why we haven't quite eradicated polio yet, or even guinea worm. Sammy, probably.
Yeah, I hate to be a part
You,
of it.
well, no, you guys have been very patient. You sat here for 3 hours listening to the prophet. So thank you very much indeed. Thank
Okay,
you.
let's thank Professor Bennett. Right, so before I let you all go, I just want to sort of say a little bit now, I'll just keep you for another 2 minutes if you don't mind, just to say what our plans are next. So we have a kind of follow-up event, which is an event called Philanthropy Games, where what we're going to do is kind of invite people to come along and have a debate about where to allocate a real sum of money. So that's what the next event for Giving What We Can Birmingham is going to be. It's going to be on Wednesday the 7th of November over at 90 Vincent Drive between 5:30 and 7:30. And all of this is on the leaflet that I've given you. So please do take those leaflets away with you and look at the information. Find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, and I look forward to seeing some of you again in the future. So I'd just like to say thank you to all 3 of our speakers. Thank you once again to the funders, Global Ethics and Pulsys. Thank you to Luke Herrera for his help, and John Gelke and Tom Terrell, who had to leave. And thanks to Dan, my cameraman. Thanks to Holly for coming up from Oxford to see it, and thanks to all of you for coming. Cheers. And if anyone didn't get one of these feedback forms, then don't hesitate to take one on your way out. Thank you.